I'm still sat here talking to Robin James from UNC in Charlotte in the States, and we've talked about your book Resilience and Melancholy, and how that relates pop music particularly to some very substantial philosophical and political issues. Can you say a little bit more about the music itself?
Sure. So I was really interested in two common musical structures, which I think are particularly interesting in the US, right? Because like 2012 was when EDM finally broke the US, right? Like mainstream students, teenagers finally got electronic dance music. And there were two sort of common compositional structures, the soar and like David Guetta, Calvin Harris, you know, the sort of Gangnam Style, the sort of build up, and then the drop. Right?
Collapse sound.
So I was interested in how they worked compositionally, first of all, right? How they structured a song's climax differently than chords structured a song's climax. But I was also interested in why that made sense now, right? Why do people find, I mean, that's the sort of conventional aesthetic question, right? Why are these structures something that people enjoy? What do people find good about them? So what I'm arguing is that the soar and the drop perform the resilience that we seek to embody in our own lives, right? So what the soar does is it sort of builds rhythmic and timbral intensity up to the point that our ears can't hear it anymore, right? So like in the same way that we can see film as a continuous image because our eyes just don't work that fast, right? Once you there's a point at which you can't hear distinct rhythmic events and you just hear either a constant sound or right? So you'll often hear, you know, the percussion get faster and faster and faster, and then there's like silence and then a big hit, right? I mean, this is sort of Calvin Harris's thing. This is what he does. So I'm arguing that's an example of sonic resilience, right? You sort of crash it and then bounce back from it, you know, all the stronger. The drop is another sort of example of that, right? You introduce this shock. It's literally sort of shock doctrine capitalism in music, right? With the wobble and whatnot. So those are the two main sort of compositional structures I'm interested in, and sort of thinking about how they work in contemporary EDM pop, how people like Rihanna sort of play with them or undermine them, and how they relate to sort of earlier avant-garde music, right? So I have this chapter on Atari Teenage Riot that talks about what they were doing in the 90s with very similar sonic structures. And they worked politically very differently in the 90s than they do today, because Neo-Liberalism has advanced to the point where the kind of noise, what was heard as noise in the 90s is now, it's now just normal, right? Like we're used to that disruption.
It's amazing listening to someone like Atari Teenage Riot now, listening to their production from the 90s, how you remember it as very kind of avant-garde and noisy, and actually it sounds exceptionally conventional in terms of the structures and the way the performative aspects of it sound kind of normal.
Yeah, and they sound absolutely normal. I mean, one way to tell is music that we think it's okay for like 11-year-old girls to listen to is just as noisy.
Yeah, it's just as kind of shouty and loud and clashy and
yeah. So it's not felt to be disruptive or oppositional or avant-garde anymore, which again I think raises interesting questions for their new album, right, that they just put out, which seems to advocate resilience and embody it, whereas the older stuff I think was more suspect of these sorts of narratives, right? You get in the 90s they're writing into the death and, you know, destroy 2,000 years of culture, and now they're all about reset.
Yeah, it's very different in terms of the sound, but also in terms of the kind of feel around it and the kind of cultural feel. Yes, it's kind of you can see why some people kind of rather find it rather disturbing or problematic or just upsetting if they're we're very attached to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's been very kind of interesting. It's really kind of interesting to see how that what seem like kind of more technical ways of talking about the compositional aspects of music, actually once you kind of get into the detail of them, fit very strongly with an account of kind of cultural and political change.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Yeah, and that's really what I'm interested in doing, right? Like, I'm not a music theorist writing just for composers or other music theorists. Like, I want to sort of deconstruct and see what's going on in the music, because I think, you know, society is organized in certain ways by certain concepts and values. Yeah. And musical works are organized in those same ways and in those same with the same values, and that's why it makes sense to us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, it's just meaningless. So.
Yeah, yeah. So if you can sort of read a song, that's like a microcosm of these bigger social structures that, at the social level, are much more abstract and hard to get your mind around. Yeah. Right? But a song is 3 or 6 minutes long. So if you can see the microcosm, you get a better sense of the macrocosm.
Fantastic. Thank you.